What's good, everybody? It's the Wave, and we back with another reaction video, of course. So I'm not sure if you guys are hip to this one. I try to switch new videos up when I upload, but this series is I've been watching for a while. They did Hidden History. It's a dude, Khalil. He actually started off on TikTok and making his own series, and him and National Geographic has recently partnered up, and he actually has his own show. So he goes to different cities. On this episode, Washington, D.C. That's where I'm from. Y'all already know it's my city, so I thought it would be interesting to watch this one together. I haven't watched this one, so it's going to be new, for both of us watching. So yeah, make sure to continue to like and subscribe. Comment some of your favorite moments at the bottom, of course, and let's keep these joints going for sure. So I'm gonna get it started. Let's get into this video. National Geographic, uncovering the secrets of Washington, D.C. hidden history. Let's go.
Did you know that the Smithsonian once collected over 200 brains in a twisted attempt to prove that white people were the superior race?
Off top crazy. Off top crazy.
Or that the largest attempt to escape from slavery in American history happened right there on the wharf, only for a traitor to ruin the entire plan? Or that Native American artifacts were found in the lawn, indicating that they once had a home in the exact location that the White House stands today.
That's crazy.
My name is Khalil Green, and I've spent
Hey, side note, that's crazy about the whole thing with hearing about What's good, everybody? It's the Wave, and we back with another reaction video. So this reaction video is actually going to be a little bit more close to home. Actually home. I'm from D.C., Washington, D.C., that is. And this is a series that I watch. Khalil Green, I believe that's his full name. But he went real viral on TikTok and I believe Instagram. Definitely his YouTube. I was hip to him before. But he just recently collab with National Geographic, for this hidden history series that he's doing, and he's been really doing a great job. This one I haven't watched, and so I'm looking forward to watching this one. So let's get into it for sure. Let's make sure you like and subscribe. Comment some moments at the bottom if you're from my city, if you're from DC. Comment if you learned something new for sure. And yeah, let's get into it. Uncovering secrets of Washington, DC hidden history, National Geographic with Khalil Green.
Did you know that the Smithsonian once collected over 200 brains in a twisted attempt to prove that white people were the superior race?
Wow, off bat already crazy, because I'm a fan of the Smithsonian museums. I'm like one of the few around my neighborhood that actually have gone. That's crazy.
Or that the largest attempt to escape from slavery in American history happened right there on the wharf.
Yeah, unfortunately,
only for a
DC
traitor
do got
to
some
ruin
history
the
with slavery.
entire plan.
That's wild.
Or that Native American artifacts were found in the lawn, indicating that they once had a home in the exact location that the White House stands today.
Of course.
My name is Khalil Green, and I've spent thousands of hours researching and sharing creepy, crazy, and covered up stories from American history. Stories that reveal shocking truths about how our country was formed. In 2024, I even won a Peabody Award for making a TikTok video series about the hidden history of New York City.
That's all right.
Now, I've teamed up with National Geographic to uncover more of these stories in cities throughout America. This is Hidden History. Today, we're headed to Washington, D.C. As the capital of the United States, D.C. is the seat of American power, and it's a home to towering monuments that serve as a symbol of freedom and democracy. But from the hands that built these iconic landmarks to the victims of the horrible experimentation that took place in the city's most respected institutions, here are 5 stories that reveal a side of Washington, D.C. that's rarely seen but impossible to ignore.
What's crazy, if you do come here to DC, you will see like a lot of traits of Native Americans. Even a lot of the streets and highways are still, got a lot of like names and remembrance of like Native Americans. So it's definitely like crazy that's still not even like, yeah.
Interestingly, our story starts in the 1970s with President Gerald Ford, who had a very unique way of easing his mind. Ford, an avid swimmer, once joked that 15 minutes in the pool was as good as 2 martinis. So after moving to the White House in 1975, Ford had an outdoor swimming pool built on the White House South Lawn. But during the excavation for the pool, construction workers made an unexpected discovery in the dirt. They found over 20 prehistoric artifacts from the indigenous peoples of this area. These findings revealed that the White House was literally built on land that was once the home of Native Americans. The artifacts that
Did they keep building though?
were discovered at the White House were likely thousands of years old, belonging to a people who lived here long before the Europeans ever set foot on this land. All of these artifacts were linked to the Algonquian-speaking ancestors of the Native Americans that did live here at the time of European arrival, the Anacostans. The Anacostans, from who we derive the word Anacostia, were
I was just about to say Anacostia, South Side. That's right off where I'm at currently broadcasting this right now. Not too far. Oh, that's crazy.
first documented by John Smith. For those of you who know, yes, that's the same John Smith who's famously associated with Pocahontas. In the early 1600s, Smith set out to map the area around the Chesapeake Bay, and he came upon the Anacostan village of Nacotchtank, which stood across from where Ronald Reagan National Airport stands today, at the current site of the Bolling Air Force Base. For a while, the Anacostans and the English maintained a relative peace,
This is literally
and they
my
traded
neighborhood.
things like beaver
That's
pelts.
crazy.
But in 1622, that fragile peace was shattered when Englishmen from the Jamestown settlement arrived in the Nacotchtank. They raided the village and set fire to it, killing several of the Anacostan people. In retaliation for that attack, the Anacostans became hostile toward the English. The Anacostans killed many English, and they captured a young man named Henry Fleet, who they held hostage for 5 years.
But as these violent
5 years is crazy.
skirmishes continued, the
That's
English
crazy.
settlers held the upper hand.
By the mid-1600s, the Anacostans were devastated by ongoing warfare and diseases brought by the Europeans, causing a severe decline in their population. Many of them left to join the larger Piscataway Nation and other nearby tribes in search of safety and security. And by 1670, all of the land that once belonged to the Anacostans was granted to English planters from the Maryland and Virginia colonies. And with the complete removal of the Anacostans came the arrival of enslaved Africans.
There's still a whole Anacostia area, Anacostia Park, and when you go down to Anacostia Park, you'll see a lot of wording and a lot of like I said, educational facts about them in that area in particular, which is crazy.
Initially, enslaved Africans were brought here to work on tobacco plantations. But as Washington, D.C. was being built, enslaved people were used to build some of the city's most iconic monuments. Enslaved Africans were forced to quarry the stone used to build the White House and to construct the building itself. And enslaved labor was integral to building both the Capitol building and very likely the Washington Monument as well. One particularly skilled black man, Philip Reed, had a hand in a number of these projects. He was instrumental in creating the Statue of Freedom that sits atop the U.S. Capitol dome.
I was just about to hope that he gets into the fact that there's an American Indian on top of the Capitol, which is like, I just want more of explanation of why.
And he was enslaved by Clark Mills, the man who made this equestrian statue of Andrew Jackson. By the 19th century, D.C. became one of the busiest hubs of the domestic slave trade. Slave dealers, as they were called, would buy people from surrounding states, imprison them in overcrowded slave jails, and finally sell them to the Deep South when they had enough people. One of the most infamous slave jails was located not far from where I am right now, near the National Mall and the Smithsonian Air and Space
I was
Museum.
just about to say he's behind the National Air and Space Museum. So if you come to DC or get any type of educational about the city, facts, I'm sorry, any educational facts about the city, if Georgetown comes up, Georgetown is a very prominent neighborhood. It actually used to be all black neighborhood, but now, I mean, of course, gentrification, of course. But a lot of those, some of those houses, I'm not gonna say a lot of those houses, but some of those houses still have like small slave quartered like rooms in them. It's wild.
Yeah, and it was called the Yellow House. The Yellow House was particularly infamous because it was featured in Solomon Northup's account 12 Years a Slave, which was later adapted into an Oscar-winning movie in 2013. Northup, a free black man, was deceived, kidnapped in Washington, D.C. in 1841, and held captive in the Yellow House. In his account, he described the horrendous conditions inside, saying, "It was like a farmer's barnyard in most respects, save it was so constructed that the outside world could never see the human cattle that were herded there." The Yellow House sat shockingly close to the U.S. Capitol building, so much so that Abraham Lincoln once remarked that he could see the slave pen from inside the Capitol. But the Yellow House wasn't the only slave pen in Washington, D.C. By one count, the city had as many slave pens as the entire state of Virginia. It wasn't until Congress passed the Compromise of 1850 that the slave trade was finally abolished in Washington, D.C. But even before that, the black population of the city didn't just sit around waiting to be freed. Many of them courageously resisted their enslavement.
With our city being so close to the Mason-Dixon line too, it's always been a very like unique space where it's like it kind of like a true mix of the South and the North. You know what I mean? You definitely get a little hints of both here when you're here for sure. But I definitely could see why people back then were like that because of the mentality. It's like, yeah, the white people at the time still had a more enslaved mentality, but a lot of black people weren't standing for that for sure.
In 1848, 77 enslaved people came right there to the wharf in Southwest D.C. to attempt the largest escape from slavery in the history of the United States. Right on these waters, they boarded a ship.
So the park that he's on right now, you guys see that water has rised up. You actually, when that water, that's the like tidal basin on the wharf, that happens throughout the year. It like floods that all the way down to the railing. You cannot usually walk down, and it's stand right there, and you see how much water that comes up. But that's Haynes Point, very popular park here in DC. If you know, especially back in the day. But that's where he's standing at the moment.
Called the Pearl, hoping that they would set sail to freedom. But things
and it looks right across to the wharf,
as planned.
like those boats behind
and
them.
What could have been one of the most inspiring stories in American history quickly turned into one of the most heartbreaking. The plan to escape was hatched months prior by a group of white abolitionists and free and enslaved black people, including a man named Paul Jennings, who had once been enslaved by President James Madison. Now, the people attempting this daring escape faced incredibly dire situations. Take Ellen, for example. She was enslaved by First Lady Dolly Madison, who cruelly tore her family apart by selling Ellen's brother down south to Georgia. Now, Ellen worked at the Dolly Madison house, which is the building right behind me. And Ellen was terrified that she too would be sold and separated from her family. And she was right to be scared. Dolly Madison was actually making secret plans to sell Ellen to a slave trader. When Ellen discovered this, she ran away and hid for 5 months before making the attempt to escape on the Pearl with her mother. Other notable families in the area were also terrified that they would be separated if their owner died. They were determined to escape before it was too late. The plan was for the Pearl to travel undetected down the Potomac River into the Chesapeake.
I definitely want to look more into this right here, the Pearl. Like, that sounds like a whole series that could be, right? Like, characters and everything.
Bay, up the Delaware River, and into New Jersey. On the night of the escape, the escapees gathered their things. They crept through the city under the cover of darkness, and they nervously boarded the ship. But in the early hours of the escape, the first sign of trouble was that there was almost no wind to propel the ship forward.
Dang.
When the wind finally did pick up, the passengers started to sing spirituals, and those who could read aloud from the Bible. But sadly, faith alone wasn't enough to pull off the escape. By the morning, the enslavers realized that their servants were missing, and local authorities quickly formed a search party. On top of that, terrible weather rolled in, and it kept the Pearl from getting out into the bay. They were then forced to dock in Point Lookout, Maryland. To make matters even worse, there was a Judas to this story. That person was a formerly enslaved black man named Judson Diggs. Now, Diggs was the man who directed the white enslavers to wear the pearl.
Wow, man. I don't know if you guys seen Django, but Sam L. Jackson character, man. Come on.
Stories differ on his motives, but according to one version, he was furious after a woman who was among those who attempted to escape on the Pearl rejected his marriage proposal. 30 white men set sail on a ship called the Salem, and it didn't take long.
So this guy going to snitch on everybody and guide them to where he at because he got denied for some joint. Crazy.
For them to catch up with the Pearl.
Crazy.
When they got there, they were armed and they were ready.
At least
for
go be free,
confrontation.
dog.
Now the black people on the Pearl were gonna fight back, but as they were unarmed, a white abolitionist who was with them convinced them all to peacefully surrender. They were towed back to Washington, D.C., and when the passengers arrived, they were met by mobs of pro-slavery white people who were seething with rage. One man even approached the abolitionist who helped them escape and cut his ear. For days, the crowds gathered and rioted in anger against the fugitives. Eventually, slave traders swooped in, buying many of them and selling them to the Deep South, to places like Georgia and New Orleans. The captives ended up facing their worst fear. They were separated from their family. But the aftermath of the Pearl incident wasn't entirely grim. Some families, like the Edmondsons, were eventually able to raise enough money to buy their freedom from Southern slave owners.
That's crazy. Dope.
And one member of that family, Emily Edmondson, later attended a school for black girls and became friends with the famous abolitionist Frederick Douglass. Perhaps even more importantly, the story of the Pearl incident fueled anti-slavery sentiment throughout the country. It also served as an inspiration for the famous—
Cool fact, Frederick Douglass' home is not far from the Anacostia area, actually, and it's still there. If you're in D.C. or ever in D.C., you can definitely go there and visit. It's pretty cool for sure.
Novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was also inspired by another local legend.
The original.
Have you ever
Uncle Tom? I know y'all heard that term before, for sure.
Heard of someone being called an Uncle Tom? For those of you who don't know, the term is a racially derogatory stereotype that refers to a black person who's seen as overly submissive to white people. The image of the docile old Uncle Tom exists in many forms of media, and it's commonly used as an insult amongst black people during political disagreements. For example, a Black Panther Party leader once accused Martin Luther King Jr. of Uncle Tomism for his refusal to endorse violent protests.
Yeah.
The reason I bring this up is because the stereotype of Uncle Tom is based on the main character in Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. That novel was inspired by the real-life story of an enslaved black man named Josiah Henson, who lived right here, just outside of Washington, D.C., in Montgomery County.
Oh, he is in Moco,
Maryland. But here's the thing. Henson, who's known as the original Uncle Tom, was absolutely nothing like that stereotype that was made in his image. Josiah Henson was born in Maryland, and one of his earliest memories was of his father trying to defend his mother when their enslaver tried to sexually assault her. For his bravery, Josiah's father was brutally beaten, had his ear cut off, and was sold to the Deep South, never to see Josiah or his family ever again. Josiah grew up on a plantation of an enslaver named Isaac Riley, where I'm sitting right now.
For sure, in slavery was the worst, but to be down in the Deep South, it seems, was just like, that's when you knew it was over, man. Like, what my people had to go through, crazy.
Henson worked tirelessly to raise enough money to buy his freedom, but his enslavers swindled him and tried to tear his family apart by selling Josiah Henson down to New Orleans. By 1830, Josiah Henson had had enough. He devised a daring plan to escape north to Canada with his family. With the help of the Underground Railroad, they traveled over 600 miles and finally found freedom in the north. When his family was finally safe and settled, Josiah Henson didn't stop there. He made the dangerous journey back to the United States multiple times.
I'm mad actually hearing this story and like what the term Uncle Tom has been turned into. I don't know. It's just, I don't know.
Helping an estimated 118 enslaved black people escape to freedom. To put that into perspective, Harriet Tubman, who's more famously associated with the Underground Railroad, helped about 70 people escape. In Canada, Henson helped establish a settlement for freedmen in Ontario. That settlement served as a place of education and refuge for escapees, and it was also the new final stop on the Underground Railroad. In 1849, Josiah dictated his life story to an abolitionist who turned it into a book called The Life of Josiah Henson, formerly a slave, now an inhabitant of Canada, as narrated by himself. Henson's story was so internationally famous that he garnered a personal audience with the Queen of England. Author Harriet Beecher Stowe read Josiah's story and was inspired by it when writing her own famous abolitionist novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's Cabin has been called the most influential book by an American author, and it was the best-selling book of the 19th century.
And legend has it that Abraham Lincoln even told Harriet Beecher Stowe, "So you're the little woman who wrote the book that made this great war?"
It significantly boosted the abolitionist movement. It helped spark the Civil War, which ultimately led to the end of slavery in the United States.
Learning the actual history of things and when you put them all into perspective, that's amazing, man. It's like, wow.
Unfortunately, even after slavery was abolished, a racial hierarchy persisted in the United States, and it was upheld in some very disturbing ways by institutions and people that are still revered to this day. One such person was the head of the Division of Physical Anthropology at the Smithsonian, the precursor to the Museum of Natural History, which is right behind me. In that role, he curated something known as the Racial Brain Collection, which was essentially a laboratory that
This is one of my favorite museums down there too.
was filled with the brains of people of color. Meet Alice Hrdlicka.
Wow.
Hrdlicka was a Czech-born anthropologist who is widely regarded as the father of anthropology and who led his division at the Smithsonian from 1904 to 1943. Early on, Hrdlicka believed that humans could be divided into three categories: black, white, and yellow-brown. He aimed to subclassify even further and believed that studying human brains was the key to understanding racial differences. Now, to get the brains he wanted, he started locally. He worked with prominent people in the DC area to collect the brains of local black residents after they died. This included children and was done without consent. Over the decades, Hrdlicka expanded.
All they want to do is research and searches and try to get to what it is, man. But it's a gift from God.
His collection globally, and he took body parts from indigenous peoples throughout the world, from the Philippines to Peru. In the end, he amassed over 250 brains, all in the pursuit of proving now debunked theories that white people were superior to everyone else. Hrdlicka was a longtime member of the American Eugenics Society, an organization that used scientific racism to argue for the government to instill policies that improve the gene pool through things like immigration restrictions and forced sterilizations. It wasn't until the 1940s, during the Holocaust, that the eerie similarities between these American scientists and Nazi scientists became glaringly obvious,
causing American eugenics to finally begin to fall out of favor.
But what's crucial to understand is that these ideas weren't just similar, They were connected. Sterilization policies in the United States, like those proposed by American eugenicist Harry Laughlin, directly inspired Nazi sterilization policies. Worse yet, one of the founders of the American Eugenics Society, that same group that Herlichka was a part of, wrote a book called The Passing of the Great Race. Adolf Hitler called that book his Bible.
Now, although the American government has
Whoa.
distanced itself from the horrors of Nazism and the Holocaust,
the same school of thought that was promoted by our leading scientific institutions was at the root of those atrocities as well. Herlichka died in the 1940s, at around the same time as the decline of the American eugenics movement. But nearly 100 years later, the Smithsonian still has some of the brains and human remains in their possession. As of late 2023, the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History had only returned 5 of the brains that they had. And it wasn't until very recently that a Washington Post investigation brought the history of the racial brain collection back into the spotlight. But luckily, through advocacy, legislation, and relentless persistence, the families and descendants of those affected,
I was going to say, can we get them back to the families, please?
continue the fight to honor the victims of this horrible science project. I actually grew up in the DC area, and although I may not have known it at the time, all of this history shaped my life in the modern day. Just take a look at a map of this area. So many place names, from the Anacostia neighborhood to the Potomac River to the Chesapeake Bay, are rooted in the names of the indigenous peoples who have cared for these lands for thousands of years. And because of the life story of Josiah Henson, slavery ended when it did in the United States, paving the way for Black Americans to begin the long journey toward equality.
And every single school trip I took to the Smithsonian as a young student
benefited from the higher scientific standards that were fought for by those who stood against eugenics and the unethical treatment of other human beings. These stories remind us that the freedoms that we enjoy today were built on the struggles of countless individuals whose names may not grace the monuments that are found around our nation's capital, but whose legacies form the very foundation of this country. Is there another hidden story that you want us to explore or sit?
Man, super dope video. Shout out to Khalil Green in this series that he got going with National Geographic. Man, it was so informative and just learning more about the neighborhood that I'm in till this day, that I grew up in all my life, and just seeing why there's still a lot of racism and inequality and just inequality. I'm tripping, and it's just yeah. I just hope that we get better, but you only get better when you know better, and you know better by learning. So I hope this video, was informative, and if you're from the area, especially specifically from the South Side like me, this one definitely hit close to home for sure. Like and subscribe. Continue to comment if you like anything at the bottom. I got more of these videos coming soon for sure, and I got some original content coming. I have streaming coming, so you guys just stay tuned. Shopwithgodlycrown.com, and yeah, I'll catch y'all on the next one. Y'all be easy. It's the Wave, and I'm out.